On today's show, your mailbag questions in the midst of a Hawks winning streak. We'll get into that, plus the rest of the season schedule, the Hornets game on Wednesday, and more. All that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1928 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Tuesday evening into Wednesday here in mid-March. And I want to encourage you, as I always do on the podcast, make it your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify and everywhere else on the audio side. Plus, we are also on YouTube, so please like this video as you are watching it and help us to spread the word to your friends, family, colleagues, fellow Hawks fans, etc. And I definitely, as always, appreciate you being here for the podcast. Most of today's show, we'll be diving into your mailbag questions, some topical stuff in the midst of the Hawks winning 3 games in a row. If you missed it, I did a full-on deep dive, as I always do, after the game on Monday. The Hawks kind of holding serve in a win over the Sixers. A very shorthanded game on both sides and plenty to get to there, but that was a good result for the Hawks, their 3rd win in a row. And then they return to action on Wednesday at home against the Charlotte Hornets. I will end this podcast previewing that game a little bit in look-ahead fashion. But in the meantime, a couple of just data points here. We have a newsletter for the Locked On Hawks podcast. You can find it at lockedondaily.com to sign up for that. And also, I get questions ever so often about a couple of other shows that pop up in the Locked On Hawks audio feeds. They are network initiatives. So one of them is the Locked On Hawks postcast. It comes from the Locked On Sports Atlanta crew over there, and they do a show after most games. They have their own YouTube channel, but the audio is posted in Locked On Hawks. You will see that it's labeled as such. So just an extra bonus thing, nothing less for me, but just extra stuff there. And then about once a week, there's an NBA squad show on the Eastern Conference. They record that during the day on Monday, and I cannot be there because I'm actually just at my day job at that point in time. So that's why I'm not on that show, but it's a network initiative. And again, just some extra content for you in the feed. It gets dropped in there when it gets dropped in there. I'm not the one that presses publishes on that, but it's there you go, just extra stuff. But still the same amount of volume of the shows that I personally host and number and all those fun things. But I appreciate that. And we'll just kind of leave that there as far as the clarity is concerned, just answering questions that I get every once in a while about what those shows happen to be. Anyway, the rest of the podcast, we'll be diving into some basketball action. And the first one comes from Avery, who actually this question came on Monday before the win, but still relevant at this point in time. The question is from Avery: can the Hawks get out of the play-in, or are we rooting for the number 7 seed at this point? What is the likelihood that we can actually get the 7 seed, and the likelihood of getting better than the 7 seed? So a good question, kind of check in on like a lot of what's going on with the Hawks right now, because of course, anytime there's a winning streak, people start to get kind of aim higher. I definitely understand that. Some of the things I'll cite on this are like what these systems of projection might say. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance here, and there's 17 games left for the Hawks. They are 31-34 right now. So, the standings are what they are. But we'll get with the first part of the question, and that is the fact that the Hawks basically getting out of into the top 6 and out of the play-in entirely. As I record this on Tuesday, the Pacers and the Pistons are actually both playing right now. So keep that in mind. That will change a little bit. But the Hawks are currently 5 games behind both Indiana and Detroit, and they are tied for the 5 and 6 seeds in the East. So it could be 4.5, could be 5.5 by the time you listen to this podcast on Wednesday or late Tuesday night. Just keep that in mind. It's somewhere in that 4.5 to 5.5 range for those teams. That is not an insurmountable gap by any means, but it is a very big gap with 17 games, basically 1 month left on the calendar. The Hawks do have the head-to-head tiebreaker against Indiana after sweeping them over the weekend, but they also lose it head-to-head to Detroit after losing to them more than they beat them this year. So to put a number on it right now, as of Tuesday early evening, ESPN has this BPI projection, and they have the Hawks with a 4.9% chance to get into the top 6. So basically 5%. And that seems pretty reasonable to me based on the objectives and kind of what the benchmark that would have to be there. Maybe a little bit low, but it's not super low, basically. I think the Hawks would probably have to go something like 12-5, maybe even better than that, to realistically get into the mix here and obviously get some help along the way as well. When you're that far behind, you just need help. Unless you go 17-0, which the Hawks are probably not going to do realistically. And look, obviously there is a chance that Indiana or Detroit get an injury or they just start playing very poorly. We've seen that recently, by the way, with Orlando. They're just kind of in free fall, and they have been for a while. There's other teams in the West that have done the same thing. But there's a chance of that, but at the same time, if that happens, you don't have to go 12-5. But I think if the Hawks were to really have a real strong chance to be a top 6 seed, they got to finish on a heck of a run here. And it's not impossible by any means, but I think 5% is like not out of the question of what there actually would be. There is a chance. It's a short version, but also realistically, I like to be pragmatic to some degree on the podcast. It is a small chance of a top 6 seed, even with these wins for the Hawks. Now, with that said, the number 7 seed is a more practical rooting interest, and that's something that, as of right now, I would pick to happen if you gave me the choice. The Hawks have a 1.5 game lead over both Miami and Orlando, and the tiebreakers are still TBD on both of those. And by the way, it's a very weird situation because the Hawks, Heat, and Magic are all in the same division, and that's also very likely to stay that way. As recently as literally 10 years ago, the division winner used to be guaranteed a top 4 seed. If that was still the case, it'd be actually pretty funny. The Hawks would be in the driver's seat for a top 4 seed despite being under 500 at this point in time. Maybe I'll petition the league to kind of bring that back in the near future. But instead of that, there is actually a crazy scenario this year that could happen where the division winner, whether it be the Hawks or the Heat or the Magic, could actually still miss the playoffs. Because if they're the 7 seed, you're likely to make the playoffs, but you're not guaranteed. You could lose back-to-back games in the play-in and fall out. But anyway, long story short, winning the division this year in the Southeast is probably, not definitely, but probably, and I would say very probably, going to be the 7 seed. And given the situation, FanDuel right now, our friends there, have the Hawks as a minus 130 favorite to win the division, which basically means at least the 7 seed at worst. And that's a pretty good indicator. Like, obviously, the betting market, as I always say, is not gospel, but it is a good public projection system. And that makes the Hawks like 55, 60%, something like that, according to that, as far as the implied odds are concerned. ESPN's BPI model has the Hawks at 53.4% to win the division, so a little bit under 54%, still more likely than not to win the division. Also, EPM and Raptor both have the Hawks as the most likely team to finish 7th right now, which would be, again, probably the division winner. So all that said, the Hawks are not a huge favorite, but they are a slight favorite as of right now, given the struggles recently of Miami and Orlando, and the Hawks banking some wins in recent days to win the division. So long story short, a 1.5 game lead with 17 games to play is notable in those projections. And the Hawks also have a pretty favorable schedule. Before the Philly game, they played this stretch of like a month straight playing a playoff level team every single game for a month. And that's part of why things are lighter now. But as of right now, today on Tuesday night, the Hawks have the second easiest remaining schedule in the NBA if you use opponent winning percentage. And that'll go up a little bit after they play Charlotte, who has a bad record on Wednesday. But still, it's a pretty friendly schedule. They had 2 games against Charlotte, 2 games against Philadelphia, 2 games against Brooklyn, a game against Dallas, and they're very banged up right now, obviously, plus home games against Portland and against Utah. So that is, 9 games out of the final 17 games in which the Hawks probably, not definitely, but probably will be favored to win fairly comfortably in the market if their guys are available, if Trey's available, et cetera, et cetera. So none of that guarantees anything. It's just a pragmatic look ahead. But even without Jalen, I would say at this point, I think the Hawks are at the very worst comparable to Miami and Orlando, even sans Jalen. And they have some built-in advantages with the schedule and the lead right now of 1.5 games built into that. So overall, I do believe the Hawks are the most likely team to win the division and by proxy get the 7 seed. I would say getting in the top 6 is not likely to happen, but is also not impossible to happen. I would say it's a 5 to 10% chance of happening. It would take a lot of wins and also some help, but definitely possible. And we'll see, basically. But at the very least, the situation for the Hawks, playoff-wise, play-in-wise, division-wise, all of that is much better than it was a week and a half ago because they're winning games and Miami and Orlando are not. And sometimes it's all that matters, especially over the short course of a period of time. And then, again, we're pretty late in the year now. We're about a month exactly from the end of the regular season. And that means there's not that many games left. So stay tuned for that. But that's a kind of the overview right now where the Hawks are in the standings. Their chances to get into the top 7, into the top 6, top 8, all those things. They are in a pretty good spot, all things considered. All right, more to come from your mailbag questions, plus a preview of the Hornets game, and all that's coming up in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by WayFair. Your home should reflect your style, and with WayFair, it's easier than ever to make that happen. Whether you're looking for a simple refresh or tackling a big home project, WayFair has everything you need in one place. WayFair's huge selection makes it easy to find the perfect piece no matter what your space or budget happen to be. Plus, they have cozy furniture, stylish decor, kitchen essentials, and outdoor must-haves. They have it all at WayFair. And very importantly, they also have the prices that fit into your budget. I recently was looking for a new desk for my apartment, and WayFair had so many different options at great prices. The site also made it simple to compare the styles, and my order arrived fast with free delivery as well. And at WayFair, they have more than just furniture. That's a very key point here. You can find everything from storage solutions to patio decor, making it the go-to for all things home. Head over to wayfair.com and find something that's just your style and do so today. That is WAYFAIR, wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will also find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. That is TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only available in the iOS mobile app. To guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, question from Weston, who says, can you help me make sense of how the Hawks can be this good in shot quality but not be a very good offense? It doesn't square to me. So this question came in response to a tweet that I sent out actually from Basketball Index on X/Twitter, and with some data in it. And basically, it's about a week ago. They shared a metric that they keep at Basketball Index. It's a really good site, by the way. A lot of good advanced metric stuff there. But it's called overall shot quality that they keep for teams, not players, but teams. And they rated the Hawks number 1 in the entire league in overall shot quality. Now, I did immediately say in that first tweet, that's not like gospel to me. Like, it's a good site. I do like it. I would never be like, all right, one number, that's definitely the truth. I believe all that. You know what I'm saying? There's always a level of, intrigue or investigation that I want to do on my own. But they do good work, and it wasn't surprising to me in the way that it was for some other people. Basically, what this endeavors to do is to kind of track the process-driven stuff, like the shots created by the team. Does not mean that they're always going to go in at a high level, but it's taking into account where they're coming from and the overall quality of the looks. Now, a similar version, not exactly the same, but a similar version of this concept is what Cleaning the Glass does. It's called Location Effective Field Goal Percentage. And basically that just says as clearly as day, this is where the shots come from between shots of the rim, shots from floater range, mid-range, corner threes, and non-corner threes. And it sets out a number for what the shot quality is, assuming that the team shoots exactly league average from all of the spots. So it's basically just where are you shooting from? And then they put that into a formula, league averages, and all right, what's the best metric from there? And that explicitly does not take into account the quality of the players, just the locations. All that said, the Hawks are 6th in that metric right now, and they are very close to being 3rd in that metric, like 0.2% away from being 3rd. So those things both agree. No matter where you slice it, the Hawks are a really, really good team at creating the right shots. That's all that is. Now, between that and the eye test and some other stuff, I agree with that. I think it's more than fair to suggest that they're really good at creating shot quality. But again, the process stuff is different than the results. And by the way, the coaching staff, what they preach with Quinn Snyder and his assistants, they want, yes, they want a lot of threes. They also want shots at the rim. It's high quality shots. It's never like only threes or only rim. You want to do both, basically, and do them both well. They take a lot of floaters, I will say, more than most teams do, but they're also in the top 5 in rim frequency this year. And they're 3rd in the league in points in the paint. All that is good process. Even if you miss a lot of those shots, and the Hawks have had some times recently where they've had some really bad finishing at the rim, but shots at the rim are still more valuable than shots that are not at the rim, basically. So why are the Hawks not better offensively? Well, there are multiple reasons for that. Number one is that they don't have great shooting talent. I said that a lot recently. I've said that really all year long, so I'm not going to do this whole thing again, but they don't have a ton of super high-end shooters. Their best shooter is probably Garrison Matthews in some degree, but he doesn't play very much because he's kind of a specialist. George Niang is a really good shooter, but he just got there a handful of games ago. Trae Young's having a shaky shooting season for him. Yes, they have LeVert now. Hunter had a good season, but Bogey was not making shots early in the year. Dyson, while he's really, really, really good, is not a great shooter at this point in time. Ricochet has been really good lately, but for the season, is below average as a three-point shooter in particular. Jalen, not his strength as a shooter, for instance. You got two centers. I know Onyeka's making more threes now, but not like a high-volume shooter at this point in time. Clint's a non-shooter, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they don't have a lot of shooting on the roster. That's part of it. The other stuff beyond that is that they're not great in two of the other kind of major tenets of offense. So that's they're just okay on the offensive glass, about league average. Not bad, but not great. And they're only 20th in turnover rate right now. So not disastrous, but there are four factors that's the old Dean Oliver thing. It's shooting, turnovers, rebounding, and then free throws. And basically the Hawks are only okay or below okay in three of those four things. Their one best thing is their free throw attempt rate, which is good. They're top 8 in the league. But the most important of the four factors is how you shoot. Putting the ball in the basket is the most important of them, at least in my opinion. And the Hawks are still about league average in shooting efficiency because they have not made enough shots. So the process has been there. But to me, overall, you have to be awesome everywhere else if you're not going to shoot the ball at a high level. Overall, though, I think the good process stuff is a very good sign for the future. That's where I would kind of focus for right now. I think the Hawks will improve their shot making in the future. I think there are enough players on this roster who I would project moving forward to be at least as good or better as shot makers, play finishers, etc. moving forward. That list is not limited to this, but I'll just name some guys right now. I think Trae Young is a better baseline shooting efficiency player than he has been this season. That's fair to say, I think. Dyson Daniels probably is going to improve, if anything, from three-point range. Zachary Ricochet, on a full season basis, is going to be better than he's been this year. Now, we've already seen that now for about a month and a half, 2 months. But early in the year, he just wasn't making shots. That's part of this as well. Jalen from three probably gets a little bit better, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, it's up and down the list. But they don't have a lot of guys that are like due for regression either. The only guy this year who was really shooting above his normal baseline was DeAndre Hunter, who's not there anymore. George Niang is a really good shooter. Like, he's kind of shooting what he's always shot when he got to Atlanta. Terrence Mann will cool off from three, but it's a small sample size anyway. It's not making a huge impact on their full metrics. So all that said, having more shooting overall will help. But the big thing from this, and the reason why I shared that metric, is that having good shot quality is just a positive thing. You can debate how much you care about that. I'm not telling you that you have to care about that a lot or a little or whatever. I think it's a good indicator. And as someone who watches every possession of every game, the Hawks do get good looks. They do create good looks. They are good at the process stuff on offense when creating positive shot attempts. It's just that they haven't made a ton of them this year. And that's hard to square. But as far as the question is, like, how can this be true or this be true at the same time? Number one reason on that list is that they haven't made a lot of shots. But also, there is more to offense than shots and quality. You have to win the margins too. There's a reason why I do so much focus on the post-game pods on what I call the margins. And that means having more possessions than your opponent, which means winning the turnover battle, winning the offensive rebound battle. Free throw attempts are also important as well. But if you can do that, the shooting, you have a little bit more margin for error. If you're neutral or below water in the margins, you have to shoot well. And you still might win, but it's way easier if you control the margins. And that's why I do that so much on the podcast. But anyway, long story short, again, good indicator, not gospel, but I do believe the Hawks are good in the process stuff, and that is just shown in the stats. All right, more to come on the podcast, including more questions from you and a Hornets preview in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Skims. When I thought out Skims would make the underwear for men, I was really intrigued by that. I've heard a lot about their quality from friends and family, and I had to give it a try for myself. And let me tell you, it is definitely living up to the hype. Many people have issues with their underwear when it comes to fit or comfort or just finding the right style for what they want, but Skims changed all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with a perfect balance of comfort and style. For example, they have these stretch 5-inch boxer briefs, and they have rave reviews as well. They're perfect for active lifestyle. They move with you. They never lose their shape, and they stay in place all day long. Whether you're working out or just running errands or just living your life, they're the most comfortable and reliable underwear available anywhere. Plus, the light material feels actually amazing in any situation across the board in your life. And you can shop all of it right now at Skims Men's. That's skims.com/LockedOnNBA or in Skims stores as well. Also, when you get there, let them know that we sent you to them. After you place your order at skims.com, select podcast in the survey, and then choose our show in the menu of the drop-down that follows. One more time, the place to go is skims.com/lockedonnba. All right, one more question to get to on this Tuesday evening podcast comes from my friend at Capitol Avenue. Great Braves follow. If you're a Braves person, that's he's always been really smart in that space, but also a Hawks fan as well. He says, let's say the Hawks get everyone back healthy and 100% for next year. Also, Ricochet takes a step forward and becomes a consistently good shooter. They pick about 14th and 25th in the draft. And let's say LeVert and Capella leave, but the Hawks maybe re-sign Larry Nance. What ultimately would the ceiling of that group be, and what moves can they make to improve that ceiling? So this could be its own show entirely, and I will not do the full deep dive because that would take forever, but I'll keep it short for now. And then, by the way, this summer will be a lot of this kind of stuff. If you are not a listener yet in the summers, post-season, basically, I do a lot of draft stuff and a lot of team building stuff on the Hawks, and that will be here in that feed, plus player breakdowns, all that stuff. It's actually, the show never stops. Let's just say that. So in the meantime, one thing that is not said in this question, obviously, but just keep in mind, they do get Jalen Johnson back. He's on track to be 100% by the summer, etc. Plus, even Kobe Buffkin, like obviously that's less prominent than Jalen Johnson, but a guy to keep in mind that people could just kind of forgotten to some degree. But I would say the ceiling for that group that he lays out for next season probably would not be like a contender at this point in time, but they would be good. And I say that just that group, nobody from the outside. Keep that in mind for right now. Adding some rookies, a couple first-round picks, would help for the future, but probably not right away. Most rookies are not good. Rookies are bad is one of my themes. Ricochet has been way better than the average rookie this year, and he was number one pick. So you can't rely on that. It's not impossible to find rookie help, but you can't bank on it. You also lose LeVert in this scenario, but even if he came back, I would say the median or a little bit higher than that projection for the Hawks with the same team, Trey, Jalen, Dyson, Ricochet's improvement, et cetera, would be like somewhere in that 4 to 6 range in the East, maybe as high as 3, as low as the high-end play-in range, something like that. That's probably realistic right now with nothing else, just bringing the band back together with Jalen. So they did that, and you rely, of course, again on. This is still a young team, so internal improvement is notable. Like the saying of growth is not linear is true. You can't just assume that everyone always gets better, even young guys. But I will say, I do think, and I think it's probably safe to assume this on some level, that Zach Ricochet will be better in year 2 than year 1. That's usually the case. Dyson, I don't know. He's been so good this year, it's like he may not be immediately better next year. We'll see. Jalen Johnson, he's probably already kind of getting up there towards his max, but not all the way there necessarily. They still have young players, a Congo with a full season, all of that stuff would be pretty interesting, plus some stabilizing of the shooting, etc. They could win 50-ish games next year. It would not blow me away at all if they did that, even without an injection of talent elsewhere. I'm not saying they will, but they could if things went well. And maybe I'll be low on that, obviously. Maybe there's stuff coming, like a breakout from Ricochet, whatever. I'm not trying to cap the ceiling, but I have a hard time getting them into that Boston-Cleveland tier with what they have right now on the roster for next year. Again, doesn't mean they can't add to the roster. That's just internally. As far as what they can do to raise the ceiling, I think if you're talking about more modest stuff, I think Okongwu and Nance, as this situation it lays out, is workable for next year. Okongwu's been playing great recently, but maybe they turn Nance into something a little bit better than that as the backup center. That's a potential option. Also, maybe you just sign LeVert. And then even if you did LeVert and Nance, you probably could still sign someone with a mid-level exception, which the Hawks have not done recently, but they could do that and still not even pay the tax probably. So that's an area to kind of add somebody, whether it's another shooter or another forward who can defend, another guard perhaps behind Trey. If they're not ready to trust Kobe yet, whatever you're looking for, they could probably add a little bit of depth with that spot. And then obviously beyond that, there is the chance or the potential of a bigger swing with trade. That's always possible. The Hawks are still a little bit below water in their draft pick capital for the future, but it's back to more normal than it was before. Thanks to the honestly brilliant DeJounte second trade. The first one was terrible. Second one, really good to get Dyson and the 2 picks. But they could package some stuff together and take a bigger swing. That's not impossible. If you get Tony Resters backing on that, if he's ready to spend some money, et cetera, that's very possible. If I had to guess right now on March 11th, they probably wait a little bit longer to do a bigger move like that, if I had to guess. You still got to deal about Trey's extension talks, that'll be a topic that we talk about even more later on. But that's a huge storyline this summer is Trey's extension talks and Dyson's as well. But even more so, Dyson will be at least restricted free agent. Trey could just get away, etc. But they can speed up this summer if they want to. I didn't get like super granular here because it's a big question and there's a lot of time in the future. But what I will say is they could either jump into that home court advantage level mix next year, and it would not be surprising. The only two teams I think are like enough ahead of them right now at full strength are Boston and Cleveland. Yes, New York had a great year, but they've also had like perfect injury luck until recently with Brunson going down. And they're really good, but they're not like so unattainable for the Hawks are right now. And then Milwaukee, Indiana, Detroit, those are not like different stratosphere teams. It's really Boston and Cleveland and then everybody else for me in the Eastern Conference. New York's kind of their own tier at third, in my opinion, but still, the Hawks could certainly be in that mix for the 4-5, something like that next year without doing anything crazy. If you wanted to go to the moon and try to get really into the mix, you probably have to add from the outside for the short term. Long term, there are more possibilities. There's still the chance that Jalen really blows up, or Ricochet really blows up, or Dyson really blows up. Like they have internal bets, but for next year, you would need some help, outside help, I think, to get anywhere beyond that like 4-5 range, probably. All right, let's look ahead now to the Hornets game on Wednesday. Briefly before we sign off on this Tuesday evening, the Hornets come to town. It's the 5th game of the 6-game homestand for the Hawks. They've been home for a long time here. Also, the 3rd of 4 meetings against Charlotte for the season. Atlanta is now 2-0 against the Hornets this year after losing to them a lot recently, actually, before this. But both games were close, I will say. Both competitive games, like 5-point games-ish. And they haven't played the Hornets since like November 30th or something like that. So it's been a long time. But Charlotte, breaking news, is not very good. They're 16-48 for the year. Net rating of about -7. Like they're not like turbo bad. They're not Wizards bad, but they're not good. That's a reasonable thing to kind of keep in mind when weighing the Hornets. Also, they have won 2 in a row. So they're not like incapable of winning, but they did lose 9 in a row before that. And the Hornets are definitely in the lottery mode to some degree right now. This part is weird. If you look at their roster, you probably wouldn't think this, but they are actually better on defense than offense this year. They are dead last in true shooting this season. They're 29th in offensive rating. They're really bad at the rim. They turn the ball over a lot, et cetera, et cetera. But defensively, they're competitive. They're well coached, I think, by Charles Lee, a former Hawks assistant, who's another head coach. But they've been a little bit lucky defensively. They're number 3 in the league in 3-point percentage allowed, which is probably not sustainable for the Hornets. But they're not horrible defensively. They're below average, but they're not bad, let's just say. But offensively, it's been really rough this year. Now, we'll say this. LaMelo Ball is going to play in this game, which is not an injury report right now. And they are much more respectable with LaMelo Ball than without him, which is obvious, but just worth pointing out. He's missed a lot of time this year. They're at about a 28-win pace with LaMelo. Now, again, that's not a good team, but it's not a truly awful one when he plays this year, basically. They're at a 14-win pace when he's out. So that's a big difference. 14-win pace is like really historically bad. 20-win pace is like just normal bad, basically. Also, that's evident in the on-off splits. They're -3 or so net rating with LaMelo on the court, which again, not great, but not terrible. -10 net rating with LaMelo off the court. Tells the story there to some degree. So he's going to play in this game, it seems like. Injury report-wise, the Hawks have Trae Young and Karis LeVert listed as questionable. They both missed, of course, if you missed it. The game on Monday, they're both out for that one. The Hawks did not practice on Tuesday at all and didn't even gather, I don't believe, as a team. So I kind of expected them to be listed as questionable because I'm not sure they came in today. So they wouldn't have a chance to like really evaluate them beyond what they were at yesterday. We may learn more Wednesday morning, shoot around into the game on Wednesday night. Trae seemed to be okay-ish last night on the bench. LeVert has the finger injury. My read on last night was that if it was a playoff game, Trae probably could have gone, but he wasn't feeling 100%. They were cautious for the right reasons, by the way, and that ended up working out well for them. We'll see about tomorrow. For the Hornets, Brandon Miller is out for the year, if you missed that. Grant Williams also out for the year for the Hornets. They have Trey Mann and Josh Okogie out for this game, and then Yusuf Nurkic is listed as questionable for Charlotte. That means that LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, Mark Williams, all going to play. So what I would say about this, the Hornets are not good, but the Hornets team that will be available on Wednesday, barring a change, is considerably better and more talented than the Philly team that we saw on Monday. That's a very low bar to clear. That was a very, very, very bad NBA team on Monday night that the Sixers used. But this is a step up from that. They have real guys. Ball, Williams, Bridges are like starting number guys on real teams. And again, Charlotte beat Miami on the road on Monday in a very similar spot. The Heat and Hawks are in a similar position this year. It was a game in Miami. Miami was trying. Charlotte obviously is, not leaving it all out there for wins every night as far as like team money perspective wise. And the Hornets beat the Heat. So the Hawks could lose this game. I'm not saying they're going to. I would pick them to win the game. They should win the game, to be very clear. But it's not one where you can just go in and like have a walkover. For example, the Hawks currently, at this moment on Tuesday night, are 8-point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel. So that's a solid favorite, for sure. But that's not like a biggest of the season level favorite. The Hawks have won multiple games this year as a bigger underdog than Charlotte will be in this game. So taking care of the business spot, though. Same thing as Monday to some degree, a little bit more difficult. But I would have said this before the game of Monday, as I am right now. If you go in and you play well, you should win. If you go in and you don't play well, you play with your food sometimes, play down your competition, you can lose. And hopefully the Hawks will not have that threat in this one. But, and obviously, Friday night's game is a home game against the Clippers. LA is much, much, much better than Charlotte and Philadelphia. And that's one where you'll have more margin for error if you can just win this one, take another win, and have a 4th straight victory and 5 of the last 6. All right. That's all I have on this podcast, everybody. I appreciate you listening to the podcast and also putting up with my voice. It's been wobbling recently. Hopefully it will return to normal in the near future. But please follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked on Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow me on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. I'm also available on patreon.com/BT Rowland for extra Hawks coverage, written stuff, extra audio, etc. All there at patreon.com/BT Rowland. And then please, please, please subscribe to this podcast. Download it. Tell your friends about the show. Check us out on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, likes, comments, ratings, reviews, all that stuff is very much appreciated. I appreciate all the support, and we're back in about 24 hours after the game between the Hawks and the Hornets. We'll see you all next time.